cop is off the beat. 26-year-old Christopher Stephen Day was arrested, accused of domestic assault. Police say an eyewitness told them that he witnessed Mr. Day swinging around a baby carriage inside a parking lot with the baby inside, and the police say the eyewitness told them that he heard his wife scream out, "Please stop hurting me." This is not Mr. Day's first run-in with the law either. He had recently gone back on patrol, serving a year in the teleserve division after an incident the police say involved a person who was already in custody. Down in Dalton, a teenager was shot in the face by two gunmen. The police in Dalton are trying to track down these two gunmen. They say it happened on 408 Wrinkle Street. The victim was reportedly awake and alert while being flown by Life Force to Erlanger Medical Center from Dalton. Sean Hannity every weekday from 3 to 6 on Nooga Radio. Russell Stroud, Nooga Radio News Talk 92.7. Now.
Expect fair skies to continue through your nighttime. Not as cold overnight, lows closer to 40. Now for Wednesday, mostly sunny, pleasantly mild, high 65 to 67. For Thursday, more clouds. Could see a late shower or two. Not bad, though, with highs back into the 60s. Looking for your dream home? Real Living Southern Realty can help.
WBLZ HD4 Ottawa, W224AZ Chattanooga,
92.7 Digital FM 95.3 HD4 Chattanooga.
A new provocation from North Korea.
North Korea launched an intercontinental ballistic missile.
GOP leaders try to wrangle Senate Republicans on the tax bill.
Think of sitting there with a Rubik's Cube trying to get to 50.
This is the CBS World News Roundup, late edition. I'm Pam Coulter. President Trump says his strategy toward North Korea is not changing despite Pyongyang's latest saber rattling in the region.
A missile was launched a little while ago from North Korea. I will only tell you that we will take care of it.
Defense Secretary James Mattis.
The bottom line is it's a continued effort to build a ballistic missile threat that endangers world peace, regional peace, and certainly the United States.
The U.S. condemned the launch and called for renewed international pressure on Pyongyang. There was great political theater in Washington over a critical spending agreement. CBS's Stephen Portnoy.
With the shutdown deadline a week from Friday, the president said Republicans and Democrats aren't even close to a deal to keep agencies funded.
Well, we are very far apart.
Democrats skipped a session between the president and top congressional Republicans, saying it would be a show meeting. That after Mr. Trump tweeted he didn't see a deal. Chuck Schumer accused the president of operating in bad faith.
These issues are far too serious for these kinds of games.
Stephen Portnoy, CBS News, the White House.
President Trump lunched with Senate Republicans hoping to build their appetite for the tax cut bill, but Majority Leader Mitch McConnell conceded it's not easy.
It's a challenging exercise. Think of sitting there with a Rubik's Cube trying to get to 50. And we do have a few members who have concerns, and we're trying to address them.
Protests outside the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau today.
Hey, hey, ho, ho, Mick Mulvaney's got to go.
But a judge ruled against Obama holdover Leandra English, who wanted to be declared interim director. CBS's Andrew Cohn.
There were two conflicting statutes, two federal laws that arguably govern how the succession should go. And this judge, nominated earlier this year by President Trump, sided with the administration and against the challengers. I don't know if we will see an appeal here. I'm not sure what good that would do.
There's a mixed verdict for the Libyan militant charged in the Benghazi embassy attack that left 4 Americans dead. CBS's Paula Reed.
Ahmed Abu Khattala was found guilty of 2 counts of conspiracy to provide material support to terrorism and 1 count of using and carrying a semi-automatic weapon during a crime of violence. But he was acquitted on 14 other federal counts, including federal murder charges for the deaths of Ambassador Chris Stevens and 3 other Americans who were killed in the 2012 attack on a U.S. diplomatic compound. Paula Reed, CBS News, Washington.
The Dow was up 255 points today. NASDAQ gained 33. Now this.
I'm Jay Farner from Quicken Loans. The rate today on a 30-year fixed-rate mortgage is 3.875%, APR 4.05%. But choosing the right mortgage lender involves so much more than just a rate. Only Quicken Loans has earned 11 J.D. Power Awards. No other lender comes close to that level of client satisfaction. And we invented Rocket Mortgage. It gives our clients a simpler, hassle-free way to get a mortgage completely online in minutes. No one else has anything like it. And our people, each one of our 17,000 plus team members throughout Detroit, Cleveland, and Phoenix provides absolute client satisfaction each and every day. So why would you go anywhere else to get your mortgage? Go to America's #1 online lender, Call Quicken Loans today at 800-QUICKEN or go to rocketmortgage.com for the best mortgage experience on earth. That's 800-QUICKEN.
Call for cost information and conditions. Equal housing lender licensed in all 50 states. NMLSconsumeraccess.org number 3030.
That the U.S. Embassy in Uzbekistan raising new questions about what happened to American diplomats in Cuba.
A USAID officer and his wife experienced what may have been an acoustic attack, according to a source. Two security sources tell CBS News it's raising suspicions Russia may have been involved in the incident and in the Cuba attack. Russia has denied any involvement. The State Department says no one at its Tashkent embassy has been diagnosed with conditions that have been observed in Cuba. Steve Dorsey, CBS News, Washington.
A company hired to help Puerto Rico did nothing. CBS's Bill Rakoff.
FEMA had given the company, Bronze Star LLC, over $30 million in federal contracts to provide emergency tarps and plastic sheeting for hurricane victims on Puerto Rico. But the company never provided any supplies. FEMA canceled the contracts without paying a cent. Critics are wondering why the company wasn't properly vetted.
You're listening to the CBS World News Roundup.
Traffic, news, and information. Nooga Radio. Digital FM 95.3 HD4 and 92.7 FM.
3, 2, 1.
Chattanooga Radio. Digital FM 95.3 HD4. 92.7 FM's news now.
A Chattanooga cop is off the beat. 26-year-old Christopher Stephen Day was arrested, accused of domestic assault. Police say an eyewitness told them that he witnessed Mr. Day swinging around a baby carriage inside a parking lot with the baby inside. And the police say the eyewitness told them that he heard his wife scream out, "Please stop hurting me." This is not Mr. Day's first run-in with the law either. He had recently gone back on patrol, serving a year in the teleserve division after an incident the police say involved a person who was already in custody. Down in Dalton, a teenager was shot in the face by two gunmen. The police in Dalton are trying to track down these two gunmen. They say it happened on 408 Wrinkle Street. The victim was reportedly awake and alert while being flown by Life Force to Erlanger Medical Center from Dalton. Sean Hannity every weekday from 3 to 6 on Nooga Radio. Russell Stroud, Nooga Radio News Talk 92.7. Now.
Broadcasting live to over 1 million souls in Chattanooga, the Tennessee Valley, and beyond on frequency modulation 92.7. Sean Hannity, 25,000 watts on digital FM 95.3 HD4. CBS Radio News, NASCAR, Bloomberg Markets, David Tulis, streaming strong at NoogaRadio.com. Live on YouTube and Facebook. Nooga Radio, News Talk 92.7. Chattanooga Radio.
Hotel room. And then once in the hotel room, he used force, he used coercion.
The lawsuit filed in federal court in Manhattan asks for unspecified damages. Time on the roundup, 7 minutes past the hour.
I'm Jay Farner from Quicken Loans. The rate today on a 30-year fixed-rate mortgage is 3.875%, APR 4.05%. But choosing the right mortgage lender means choosing more than just a rate. Does calling the company with 11 J.D. Power Awards for client service matter? Does calling the company that invented Rocket Mortgage, the industry's most innovative technology, matter? If working with America's #1 online lender matters to you, call Quicken Loans today at 800-QUICKEN or go to rocketmortgage.com.
Equal housing lender, NMLS number 3030.
This is Charles Osgood. Since auto owners insurance began in 1916, the world has entered the information age of computers, email, and smartphones. While technology continues to advance, we believe people help people best. That's why you'll only find auto owners insurance from your local independent agent, a real person who protects your life, family, and business. Auto Owners Insurance, 100 years of putting people first. Find your local independent agent at autoowners.com. That's autoowners.com.
There are a lot of familiar names among the Grammy nominees announced today. CBS's Jim Taylor has details.
Big Grammy story this year, rap and R&B artists heavily dominating the top 4 categories, led by Jay-Z, 8 nominations.
Shot JC.
Kendrick Lamar, 7 nominations.
Nobody pray for me.
Bruno Mars has 6. 60th Annual Grammy Awards at the end of January.
Look out!
Jim Taylor, CBS News.
Royal wedding fans can mark their calendars. CBS's Vicki Barker.
Palace officials say Prince Harry and Meghan Markle will get married next May in St. George's Chapel, which is inside Windsor Castle. The Queen will be there, but this will not be a state occasion, so no other heads of state are expected. And unfortunately for British children, they likely won't get the day off school.
That's the World News Roundup for Tuesday, November 28th. I'm Pam Coulter, CBS News.
Well, that's some kind of intro there. You're listening to Nooga Radio, NoogaRadio.com, 92.7 FM, Clutch with Keon Rose. And look, so little wonky start here, but there's a lot to talk about today because between when we last talked and today, a lot of football has happened. Way too much football has happened. Arguably the most football in between breaks that we've had, right? Because we last talked on Tuesday, and after Tuesday, you had 3 Thursday football games in the NFL. You had a bunch of post-Thanksgiving college football games. You had a slew of high school football games. You had a bunch of college football games on Saturday. You had the full slate of NFL games on Sunday. You had Monday Night Football, and now it's today. And we have not talked about any of this. And I did try and put up a Facebook post on Monday to try and cover some of it. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really seem to matter there. It doesn't really seem to make a huge difference because I'm looking at all of this stuff that I need to talk about, and I'm going, wow, this is overwhelming. It's overwhelming. There's a ton of stuff to cover. And when I look at where I need to start, I think it's obvious, right? University of Tennessee almost hired Greg Schiano to be their head coach in a way that I think is alarming, right? Like the reason why I find any of this stuff to be fundamentally alarming is that John Curry has been the athletic director for what, a year now? Not even a year. They hired him in the offseason of last year, late in the offseason of last year. We haven't even had in the summertime of last season, the last college football season cycle. And so John Curry has not even been here a year yet. And I am looking at this and going, wow, Tennessee fans have to be worried about John Curry, right? And people are worried about John Curry because how ridiculous does it have to be that you get the coaching hire, the first coaching hire that you have to make as athletic director. And so far as the fans are concerned, you get that coaching hire wrong right out the gate, right? People are so unanimously in favor of not having Greg Schiano that absolutely nobody wanted this guy. Vols fans were that upset, and understandably so. Though the fact that this is an understandable reason to be upset seems to be hit or miss for some people. It is, right? I was listening to Dan Patrick earlier today. Dan Patrick is one of the legendary sports broadcasters of all time, right? Like Dan Patrick on Sports Center. Dan Patrick has his own radio show, and Dan Patrick has been a guy, like if you want to get into sports broadcasting and you are a young person, you need to listen to Dan Patrick, right? Like Dan Patrick might be the best interviewer in the game. But I think that Dan Patrick might be absolutely off base on this point, which is that Tennessee fans not wanting Greg Schiano means that they are delusional. And I'm like, how, though? Because Greg Schiano has a reputation, right? So one reason why Vols fans revolted into not wanting Greg Schiano to be their head coach is this. Vols fans revolted because Greg Schiano, there's an allegation against Greg Schiano that he may have helped cover up some of the child rape at Penn State, right, with Jerry Sandusky. Now, I think that it's a little unfair to peg Greg Schiano with that one. And the only reason why I would say that is unfair, because I take child rape very, very seriously. But the only reason why I would say that is unfair is because nobody actually observed Greg Schiano covering this stuff up. It's just an allegation, and the person who made the allegation in their deposition into the Penn State investigation did not witness Greg Schiano covering anything up firsthand. They heard this information secondhand. And so I think there's a certain level of innocent until proven guilty that you have to have with Greg Schiano in that case, right? even if morally you want to stand up and say, hey, I don't think that this guy should be coaching here for that reason, I still think that it's not fair to cut that guy out because of that if you don't have proof. And we don't have proof. So there's that, right? So the other reason that Vols fans absolutely revolted against Greg Schiano is that, like, he's not a winner, really. That's the thing. Greg Schiano did transform Rutgers over time into a reasonable school, into a reasonable opponent for people to play. But Greg Schiano hasn't ever, like, won a conference. You know what I'm saying? Like, Greg Schiano hasn't ever won a division. Never. And then you look at Greg Schiano's track record. You look at his background. And for me, it's all about track records and backgrounds. And Greg Schiano has the reputation of being a bully, right? I mean, he lost the Tampa Bay Buccaneers locker room in large part because he was a bully. He lost the Buccaneers locker room in large part because he was the kind of guy that would not be very kind to those he was coaching, right? Like he had spats with the media. He had spats with his own players. He had spats with other coaches. Do you remember that one time that the Giants were beating the Buccaneers and then Eli Manning went to go kneel down and Greg Schiano had his defensive players attempt to stop the kneel down attempt? You could get somebody seriously injured in that situation, right? Like, the game is formally over. Kneeling down is just something that you do to not rub salt in somebody's wounds. There was no way you were winning that football game. There's no way you're winning that football game. And Greg Schiano sent his guys out there to stop the kneel down attempt. Now, there is a certain level of competitiveness that I can appreciate, that if you are trying to win a football game and you could stop a kneel down attempt, shouldn't you try? Right? And I remember at the time I waffled on this all the time, but actually I come to the conclusion that, like, has anyone ever stopped the kneel down attempt? Has that ever happened? I don't know. Has anyone ever stopped it? I've never heard of it happening. Right? Like, this is just the formality that the game is over. There's still time on the clock, and rather than keep running up the score on you, I'm just going to kneel down and run the clock out. But Greg Schiano sent his guys after that, and Tom Coughlin got upset with him. And the thing is, Greg Schiano at that time, rookie head coach, newbie head coach in the NFL. Tom Coughlin, veteran, right? Tom Coughlin, beater of the Patriots twice. Tom Coughlin is a guy that's got the respect of just about everybody in the NFL. You know what you have to do to piss off Tom Coughlin? You have to do a whole lot to piss off Tom Coughlin. And Greg Schiano coached football for one NFL season and somehow managed to piss off Tom Coughlin. Not in opposition to, by the way, pissing off his entire locker room, getting the entire group of players that he was tasked with coaching upset at him. Right? Like, that's huge. You can't be that way. He's like, he was just being a bully. He was being a jerk for its own sake. And you cannot do that, right? And Buccaneers players, look, said that this man made playing football not fun. Now, I don't know about you, but this man made playing football not fun for a group of guys who receive money to play a game for a living. What do you have to do? What do you have to say? How do you have to treat people in order for them to no longer having fun to receive money to play a game? What do you have to do to people? Because you can do that, right? Like, I don't know if you've ever played games with people who are just jerks, but yeah, games are supposed to be fun. You can play a game with a person who makes a game not fun. Absolutely, you can. You can absolutely make a game just absolutely no fun for people who showed up to have fun, right? And it doesn't matter what game you're playing. Like, football is a tough game already. Football's brutal. You already have to deal with injuries, the fact that your body's being pounded into oblivion. But you and I know people who can make a game of Uno not fun, who can make a game of checkers not fun for any party involved. Greg Schiano is that dude. Why would you want that dude in your locker room coaching your players? Why? And Tennessee fans recognize this right out of the gate. here's the thing where I give a lot of props to Tennessee fans. They understood what the score was and reacted immediately. Man, I thought the age of activism and protesting was dead. Nah, man, when people are motivated to protest, stuff gets done. People didn't want Greg Schiano to be the head coach of Tennessee football, and it didn't happen because everybody got together in collective outrage, and everybody knows this. Like, the thing that's bothering me the most about this whole situation is that people in the media are making Tennessee fans seem crazy and delusional and like lunatics. And, well, you should just appreciate whatever head coach you get because look how bad you've been since Philip Fulmer, right? The Vols are only one game over 500 since Philip Fulmer got the axe a while ago. And for me, it's like that's the illogical way of looking at it. You should just be happy with whoever it is that they go out there and hire because you have been bad this whole time. And it's like, no, that's the opposite of that is true. Because we've been bad for so long in Tennessee, you can't just accept anybody as your head coach. Certainly not a guy who's going to make football at Tennessee, which is something that hasn't been fun this year, all the way not fun. What are you crazy? Are you out of your mind? Yeah, Greg Schiano is about to make football at Tennessee. It's already not fun right now, right? All of the losing, going 0-8 in the conference, getting blown out by Missouri, getting stomped to death by Vandy, getting punched in the face week after week after week. But Vols fans are just supposed to what? Just take whoever they give you? No, especially if you know that guy's not good, right? And I don't know how good Greg Schiano would or would not have been. But I know that when a guy's got a reputation of making football completely not fun for guys who get paid, I'm not going to sit here and bring this guy to coach football for guys who don't get paid. Like, that's just not about to happen right now. You've got to be kidding me. Clutch with Keon Rose here on Nooga Radio, NoogaRadio.com here on 92.7 FM. I don't know exactly what the deal is, but yeah, I don't think Vols fans are crazy for not wanting Greg Schiano to be the next head coach of Tennessee football. You understand that the highest paid public official in Tennessee is always the University of Tennessee's head football coach. You understand that, right? Nobody in this state gets paid more than him. He gets paid more than the governor. He gets paid more than everybody, right? That doesn't necessarily mean his net worth is higher, but it means he gets paid more. For you to be paid more, you have to absolutely 100% of the way be worth it. And I don't know that Greg Schiano was 100% of the way worth it, right? Like that to me seems to scream of that. I went through, did some searches and stuff on Greg Schiano and his reputation. He got a reputation of being a bully. I don't know if Vols fans want that, and Vols fans know. Now, I have been on the record, by the way, of saying that you never listen to fans. You don't listen to them. Fans don't know what they want. Steve Jobs always said this when he was working for Apple when he was alive, right? Like that you don't ask people what they want. They don't know what they want, right? People didn't know that they wanted the iPhone until the iPhone existed. Then once it existed, everybody said, "Oh yeah, no, I want an iPhone. That's exactly what I want." And now every phone is a touchscreen phone. Every phone is the iPhone. Because one guy, and let's face it, the team around him and behind him envisioned a device like the iPhone and said, hey, let's go ahead and make this. And people wanted it and didn't know that's what they wanted until it came about. People didn't know that they wanted an iPod until they got an iPod. People don't know. Absolutely. They have no idea what they want. They don't know what they want until they get it. And that's the reason why I've said for years and years and years, never listen to fans. But I'm actually about to amend that. I'm actually about to walk that one back because I don't think I'm 100% accurate on this concept of you don't listen to fans. I think that there is one situation in which you do actually listen to fans. And it happened this Sunday. When the fans tell you what they don't want. Because everybody, nobody knows what they want. Nobody knows what they want, right? Like I just said, nobody knows that they want an iPhone until they got an iPhone. But people know precisely what they don't want, right? When people tell you what they don't want, you ought to listen. People didn't want Greg Schiano, and not like kind of, sort of. People unanimously did not want Greg Schiano. And look, I'm not a Vols fan, right? I didn't grow up in Tennessee. I moved here, and I got a soft spot for Tennessee football because I like you guys. I don't know. I just remember watching Peyton Manning growing up. There was a lot of him on my TV screen. We watched a lot of CBS football as a kid. So, like, yeah, I like, and Peyton Manning, you know, for me, one of my favorite athletes ever. So I've always had a soft spot for the Volunteers. All I'm saying is I root for the University of Texas. If for whatever reason they decided to fire Tom Herman and bring in Greg Schiano, I would revolt, right? I would drive back to Austin, Texas now. I would drive to Austin. I would be on the road now. Like, if I got a text saying, oh, yeah, Texas football considering hiring Greg Schiano as their head coach, I would get in my car right now. I would leave this hot mic and drive to Austin, Texas to stop that from happening. So I know. And that's the thing. People have an easy time judging Vols fans over this by going, oh, Vols fans, they're delusional. These people are crazy. And it's like, yeah, your team didn't almost hire Greg Schiano. What, you were going to do it? Right? If you root for Wisconsin, if you root for any of these other schools, right? Or let's make some comparable comparisons here. Some schools that have a tradition of being winners but have fallen on hard times lately, right? So UCLA just hired Chip Kelly. If UCLA were in the same position that Tennessee were in and they almost hired Greg Schiano, you think that people would call them crazy for not wanting Greg Schiano? How come it is that Vols fans get to be crazy for not wanting Greg Schiano? Like, to me, that's the most sane thing this fan base has ever asked for. Is not that guy. Anybody but that guy. That's the most sane thing that this fan base has ever asked for. Guy's a bully. The guy's got a reputation, okay? Right? I remember reading one anecdote about Greg Schiano that people said Greg Schiano wouldn't talk to you in the hallway just to make you feel uncomfortable. He would walk past you and you would say good morning and he would look at you like you were crazy. Like, I don't know about you, but then I read stories like that. I don't want that guy coaching my football team. I just don't want it. How does that make you crazy? How does that make you crazy? I don't think that makes you nuts at all. And I think if you understand that you don't want a guy, you got to speak up and say something, or you're going to wind up with another head football coach that you don't want, right? And Tennessee has to be worried about John Curry now, because John Curry is a guy, he's a former Vol. John Curry is a guy that's supposed to understand what Tennessee football is all about, to be able to show up and understand the vision and understand the way that this school works and understand the traditions and the history and everything that they stand for. And he almost hired a guy that everybody else pretty much to a man did not want. That does not make me feel very confident in where we're headed next. But there is a list of coaches that you'd have to consider. Right? There's a list of guys you need to consider and you need to look at if you're going to sit there and say, well, we don't want Greg Schiano, then who do you wind up taking? On the list of people, University of Central Florida head coach Scott Frost, right? You got to talk about Charlie Strong at South Florida as well, because Charlie Strong may not have done very well at the University of Texas. And I think that's very telling to me, because the University of Texas and the University of Tennessee, I think, have a lot of similarities in terms of the rabidness of their fan base, how much they expect to win, and how great they were and how far they've fallen. I think there's a lot of parallels between the two schools. Now, I think Texas reached higher heights more recently because they won their national title in 2005. And I also think Texas football has fallen not quite as far either as Tennessee football. Just in large part because they just have just banks and banks of money. Just people in Texas will just throw money at football problems until they get solved. In a way that I think that in Tennessee, we're a little bit more reserved. Not entirely, but a little bit more reserved in that regard. Clutch with Keon Rose here on 92.7 FM, Nooga Radio, NoogaRadio.com. Not sure exactly why the brake's not firing, but the brake's not firing. So we're just going to keep rolling on through this one. But listen, I am entirely of the mindset that you got to get a guy that stands for what your school stands for. The identity is a big part of success, right? That there are certain people, if you were going to hire someone to be the CEO of Disney, you wouldn't hire certain folks because Disney's got a family-friendly image, and you've got to have someone who understands that mentality, who understands that, like does all the things that a CEO is expected to do, right? A CEO is expected to go out there and run the company, to lead you to growth, to lead you to further development. A CEO is expected in some situations to even be very ruthless. CEO is expected to do all of these things. And yet, the CEO still has to represent your company in a way that is consistent with who you are. And Disney's going to run one way, and Warner Brothers is going to run another way, and Samsung's going to run another way. You've got to hire someone that runs your company in your image. And Greg Schiano didn't fit the image, right? And I would say this about Scott Frost. I'll say this about Charlie Strong. Like, those guys are more in line with what the image is. I even heard rumors of T. Martin possibly being the next head coach of Tennessee football, and they are looking at him because I think they're looking at all the possibilities. I don't know if the T. Martin hire is the greatest hire. I feel like the T. Martin hire works because it feels really good. Like, the last time we won a national title, T. Martin was the quarterback of this school. Let's go ahead and bring T. Martin back. Like, I understand where you're coming from on that one. And T. Martin offensively is a guy that when he coaches offenses, you can tell he understands the game. Sports Talk with Sam Jordan. Sam Jordan was mentioning before this show that, yeah, you look at Jim Bob Cooter, who's the offensive coordinator of the Detroit Lions. Like, that would be a really good fit as well. Guy that played here in Tennessee. And again, understands offense. And for me, I think that Tennessee would benefit from having an explosive offense, right? So that also plays a part into this as well. The Tennessee would benefit from looking exciting because you can say what you want to say about Tennessee football. In the last however many years, Tennessee has not been exciting offensively. It just hasn't been. We've had games from Josh Dobbs. We have. But consistently, this team has struggled in that department. It has. I think you've got to get a guy that matches that bill. That, yes, will appease the fans. I'm sorry. But when it comes to coaching, don't focus group. Like, don't hire the guy that the fans want. But when the fans unanimously get together and say, here's the guy you're about to hire, we don't want him. We don't want him. Then, yeah, listen to them. They know what they don't want. Right? Greg Schiano, like, I didn't like the fit. And I actually said this last Tuesday. I didn't like the fit, but he was the front runner. And anytime a guy's got a reputation of being a bully, I don't like that guy coaching college kids, college young men, college-aged people. Like, you've got a reputation of being a bully. I don't want you near young people, right? And I would say the same thing, by the way, of Mike Leach. Mike Leach up at Washington State. Mike Leach is a great coach. He's offensively gifted. Like, he understands the game at a very high level. But remember that Mike Leach got ousted from college football previously for bullying one of his athletes. Like, just absolutely denigrating them, verbally abusive. I don't necessarily know if I want that guy coaching my guys, right? Like, there's a certain level of anger and rage that you're going to accept because Coach K is also a very angry guy. I don't know if you've listened to a Coach K Duke practice, but man, that guy swears like a sailor. Or let's say a soldier, because Coach K went to West Point. Like just a never-ending parade of bleep this and bleep that, basically. I worry about guys like that. Now, some guys wind up being good because Coach K's also got like a loving side to him as well. If that's not something that people know about you, though, that's a harder sell. And I think also success plays a huge part into it. The fact that Greg Schiano has not reached the heights of college football does work against him when the whole bully thing comes up. Because it's like, well, yeah, we could certainly forgive a whole lot if we knew in exchange you were going to win. But we don't know that, and this is a risk that's a little too big. It's too much of a leap, I think, for a lot of Vols fans to make. And I don't think that they're crazy for that at all. I don't think that makes them delusional. I don't think that that makes them insane. You have to give them a lot of props for understanding what they believe their team needs and getting together in mass to say so. They clearly understand this program and organization more so than the athletic director. And yeah, the athletic director does need to listen to the fans on a certain level, because if you don't listen to the fans, you're not going to be athletic director of whatever school you are at for very, very long. Right? I can't believe it got that far. Like, I really can't believe that they got so far as almost hiring him, because last week they said they were going to hire somebody before the weekend was up. And I don't think anybody believed for a half second it was going to be Greg Schiano. Like, yeah, the kickback on that was strong, because I don't think any of us actually saw that one coming. I didn't. Maybe I won't speak for all of you all. I didn't see it coming. Maybe that's just me, man. I certainly did not see that one coming in any particular kind of way. Clutch with Keon Rose here on Nooga Radio, NoogaRadio.com. So yeah, there were moral reasons for the Greg Schiano non-hire. I think there were some football reasons too, if we're completely honest with ourselves. And I think too, one of the things that people say about Greg Schiano, like, people are treating Greg Schiano like he's some kind of victim. Did Greg Schiano die? I mean, not to be too crass about it, but Greg Schiano, to my knowledge, is very much alive. You know what I'm saying? Like, Greg Schiano's very alive. He's not dead. He'll get hired other places. He'll get other jobs, just not this one. Like, really? We're really going to be flipping out over, oh, no, Greg Schiano's not getting hired. How unfair is that? No, what are you talking about? Greg Schiano will be hired for other jobs. He's a very, very good defensive coach and brilliant. And I think maybe Greg Schiano gets to be the head coach of somebody. Tennessee fans did not want him. And I think that they are, A, completely justified in not wanting him, and B, completely right about not wanting him. It's not a good fit. And the athletic director should be the guy that knows this. And it feels like everybody but the athletic director is the guy that knows this. Is that not absurd? Is that not insane? Yeah, man, I feel like I'm on a runaway train right now. For whatever reason, we got some technical difficulties going on. This break is not firing it out at all. I'm about to actually speak for a whole hour. Kind of nuts. So the other bit of news, Florida seals the deal with Dan Mullen, which, you know, and the details of the Dan Mullen hire come out, because Dan Mullen's about to make a whole lot of money. Dan Mullen is about to make more cash in 1 year than any of us is going to see in life. And honestly, I regret whatever confluence of things happened in my life that led to me not wanting to be a football coach. I should have been a football coach. I'm not saying I would be a good football coach. I'm not saying that, like, I would make it to the heights of coaching college football. I'm saying it's worth the risk to try. Here are the details of Dan Mullen's deal, right? Dan Mullen will make $6 million a year. He's got a 6-year deal. He will make $6 million a year. He has a $12 million buyout. So if Dan Mullen goes to Florida and is just straight trash, and I don't think he will be, because he's really good, and I think Dan Mullen is my favorite coach in the SEC, right? I like, in terms of just like the guy just wins and just goes out there and gets it done. If I had to pick an SEC coach to be the SEC or to be the head coach of the football team that I root for, I said I root for the University of Texas. Of all the coaches in this league, I would go with Dan Mullen. I absolutely would go with Dan Mullen. I think he's, you know, okay, Saban. Let's be fair, Saban. But like, if you exclude Saban from the list, Dan Mullen is like the next guy that I would like. I think so. But yo, Dan Mullen's about to make $6 million a year for the next 6 years. Right? And they break down the salary. It's a $3 million base salary. He gets $1.7 million for media and public relations income. He gets $700,000 for equipment related compensation, $200,000 for an expense account, $350,000 in money from the school's Nike contract. And then $700,000 in airplane use that reverts back to the Athletic Association if it's unused. So yeah, the incentive there, of course, is to just keep using the plane until there's no money left, because that's what I would do. I wish I could get mad at some of these college coaches for just like flying everywhere, places that they don't need to be. You know, like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go recruiting out in Tahiti. I don't know what's down there. But I'm saying if they just give you that airplane and just say use it, and all the money you don't use comes back to us, I would be using that plane so unnecessarily, it would be ridiculous. So Dan Mullen is about to be a guy that makes $6 billion a year for the next 6 years of his life. And I just wonder if I did not get into the wrong profession, if I did not get into the wrong life. My parents told me, they tried to tell me, Keon, this radio thing, look, we know you love it. We know it's your passion. Radio, by the way, is my dream job. I'm living my dream literally right now. But my parents are like, yeah, you're not going to make a ton of money. Why don't you do something that makes money? Like that was their thing all the time. Why don't you do something that makes money? Because they're parents and they love me and they don't want me to be poor and live life like some guy on the streets. But I had to follow my dreams. But I can't help but wonder if I did not have dreams that probably could have had more money in it. Like, I don't know, college head football coach, because I'm looking at Dan Mullen's money and I know they tell you not to count another man's money, but that looks like nice money. And I'm just wondering, because I've been very positive in my endorsements of Dan Mullen through the years, right? Like I've got 3 years of tape on how much I like Dan Mullen. If Dan Mullen wouldn't cut me a little bit for just being completely positive all the time and upbeat about his life. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm not begging. I'm not begging. I'm just saying, if Dan Mullen wanted to slide a little bread this way, I would not be upset. That's all I'm saying. Okay. If he just wanted to work a little thing out, if we could just work something on the side, and then like that sounds a little bit like payola, which is a little illegal. I'm just saying, I have been a supporter of Dan Mullen, right? Like I could understand Nick Saban not wanting to give me nothing. I have been very critical of Nick Saban, and I've been very critical of Butch Jones, and I've been very critical. Like I'm critical of a lot of people. But there are two people I think that I'm not saying they owe me. I'm saying it would be nice if they had just gone, you know what, you've been a very positive guy in life. Here's like $5,000. $5,000 for me right now is a life-changing amount of money. I feel like that joke went on a lot farther than it ever should have gone. The point is, Florida got their guy. And it's funny because Dan Mullen used to be Tennessee's guy. Like he was at the top of the Tennessee list for a while. And then Tennessee, I don't know what Tennessee football did. And here's the thing. I always say that you should try to do something. And you're listening to Clutch with Keon Rose here on Nooga Radio, NoogaRadio.com, 92.7 FM. I know you haven't heard it in a while because it's been a very, very long time. It's been a very, very long time since a commercial fired. I don't know who it is that needs to be out there to fire this break for me. I'm just saying it's been a very long time since a commercial fired, and I have been talking nonstop for a particularly long amount of time. But anywho, I'm looking at this stuff and I'm going, how did Tennessee manage to botch this, right? Like there was a point where Chip Kelly and Dan Mullen were on the table. How did you get to the point where Greg Schiano was the best option that you thought you had? I'm serious. How did we get to that point? Like, I understand Greg Schiano made the list, but hey, man, there's a difference between making the list There's a very big difference between making the list and being the guy that they came up with. How did he wind up being the guy that they came up with? Like at this point, I would be more open to the idea of a Lane Kiffin return. And to be clear, I don't want Lane Kiffin. Okay. And there's some Vols fans that are sympathetic to the idea of Lane Kiffin. No. Okay. There have been three head coaches of this football team since Philip Fulmer got fired. 3 of them. And every single one of them has found one particular way to be absolutely embarrassing. And the way that Lane Kiffin found his way into being embarrassing is the reason why he's currently at Florida Atlantic University, which is that he's an untrustworthy guy with a lot of ego and a lot of arrogance. And he just kind of goes out there and does what he does. And then when Lane Kiffin is done with you, when Lane Kiffin decides that he's used you all up, He decides that he moves on. There's like no loyalty with that guy at all. And there's an entire, 20-minute long, very awkward press conference of old Al Davis talking about how there's no loyalty from Lane Kiffin when he hired Lane Kiffin to coach the Raiders. He fired Lane Kiffin and then had a press conference that, even though that press conference happened in the 2000s, it looks like it was filmed in 1975. And Al Davis came up off of his deathbed, basically, to say that you can't trust Lane Kiffin. I don't want Lane Kiffin back here, but I would be more open to Lane Kiffin than Greg Schiano. I don't know, the guy that you can't trust, or the guy that's just straight up a bully to everybody. Which guy are you taking? Right? Like it's a choice between bad and worse, but like which one are you taking? I'm taking Kiffin. If I have to, like, gun to my head kind of situation, like absolutely. Clutch with Keon Rose, Nooga Radio, NoogaRadio.com here on 92.7 FM and 93.5 FM HD4 in Chattanooga, Tennessee. So we have all that stuff, right? Tennessee said they did their vetting on Greg Schiano. It's like, did you vet the fact that he's just a mean person? Because that seems to be worth mentioning. I would think that would have to be worth mentioning. And here's why I think that would have to be worth mentioning. Because when NFL scouts are about to draft quarterbacks, here's the thing that you find out about them. Drafting a quarterback is this. You talk to the people around the quarterback, right? And a lot of the scouts around Peyton Manning and the Ryan Leaf decision, if you remember that, if you think all the way back to 1999, when Peyton Manning was about to be drafted into the NFL and Ryan Leaf was the guy that was there, and people were like, this could go either way. You could draft Manning, you could draft Leaf, and you don't lose in either direction. But everybody that said that they chose Peyton Manning said that they chose Peyton Manning because Peyton Manning was very kind and respectful to everybody. And you can learn a lot about somebody by how they treat the equipment manager. And that Ryan Leaf treated the equipment manager like garbage. And you knew immediately. Now, we can't come to find out later, by the way, that Ryan Leaf has got a whole lot more problems. And it wasn't just he was a bad person. He had some mental issues that he had to work out eventually. But like when you look at the whole Greg Schiano deal, you look at the whole Greg Schiano situation, and you're just like, man, I absolutely cannot believe that happened, or that almost happened. But Greg Schiano treats everybody like dirt, right? Like when he was the head coach, and it was weird. When he was a head coach, you've got all of these stories, and I'm not saying you believe every single story, right? Because some of these stories are alleged. I don't want Greg Schiano coming after me for slander. I know a lot of these stories are alleged. Okay, I know that these stories are alleged. I'm just saying, there's so many of them. That's a red flag. That is a red flag. Okay, so I want to shift gears over a little bit to the Iron Bowl, because that also is a big time story. Auburn and Georgia playing in the national title game again, because Auburn was able to defeat Alabama, which is crazy to me. And I've been looking it up and going, well, can Auburn beat Georgia a second time? Has Georgia evolved enough? To be able to win this game? Because honestly, you lose this game, you're not in the college football playoff, which does stink to me a little bit, because I do think that Auburn and Georgia, talent-wise, are worthy of being in the playoff. They're just not going to do both teams. Auburn's got to win this game if they want to get in. Georgia's got to win this game if they got to get in. And there's a lot on the line. There's a lot of drama on the line here, and I get it. I do, but I can't help but think that Auburn's going to win this one again, right? I thought it was going to be a tough test for Georgia last time. I picked Georgia to win the game, though, and then Auburn did something crazy and went out and beat Georgia. Now, you go back and look at it and go, well, how is that possible? And it's Georgia's a one-dimensional football team, right? They're a one-trick pony. Now, they're a one-trick pony with a really, really good one trick, but it's still a one-trick pony. And if you play somebody who can take that one dimension that you have away, You are now playing zero-dimensional chess. It's not good. You can't win like that. And so, yeah, we saw the games afterwards in which Georgia relied on Jacob Eason a whole lot more. He was throwing the ball a whole lot more, and he looked a whole lot more comfortable and consistent. And here's the thing that I find to be most alarming about all of this stuff is I don't know if Jacob Eason can do this against Auburn's defense again. Auburn's defense took a guy like Jalen Hurts, and you know how much I like Jalen Hurts. I think that Jalen Hurts is legitimately the best quarterback in the SEC. And I know that he's got the problems with the accuracy in the deep ball, and the intermediate game and the short game tend to be more of his bread and butter, and sometimes his decision-making isn't great. But when the game is on the line, Jalen Hurts is the guy that you can rely on, and the numbers back that up. The numbers prove that. Here's the issue, though. Not against Auburn. It didn't happen against Auburn. Auburn can take your best punch and reduce it to rubble. That's how good this team is defensively. Also, shout out to Gus Malzahn turning this whole thing around. Remember when Gus Malzahn almost didn't have a job a year ago? Remember when Gus Malzahn almost got fired? Gus Malzahn almost got fired. I will never forget how close Gus Malzahn got to being fired. Gus Malzahn was one overturned call away from the end of the game last year and being fired. It was Gus Malzahn's job on the line versus Les Miles' job being on the line. In the Doo-Doo Bowl, you had two teams playing each other. Yeah, it was the Doo-Doo Bowl. You had two teams playing each other that did not deserve to be considered to be good football teams, but at the beginning of the year, we did consider them to be good football teams. And we were like, nah, Les Miles is going to prove why he still got his job. And Gus Malzahn was on the hot seat, and they were both on the hot seat together. And by the time they got to that game, we basically felt like the loser of that game is going to wind up walking home without a job. And sure enough, Les Miles lost that game and wound up going home with no job. But here's the thing that blows me away on this. That 100% blows me away on this. The LSU Tigers almost won that game, and then the officials overturned a call at the end of the game that wound up giving Auburn the victory and saving Gus Malzahn's job. Gus Malzahn has since acquired Jarrett Stidham to be his starting quarterback, and since that moment, Auburn has been not just good, they've been great. They've been transcendently good, right? Led by Jarrett Stidham, who's not the typical Gus Malzahn quarterback, right? Like the typical Gus Malzahn quarterback looks like Cam Newton. Now, I can make the very strong argument that if I coached college football, my preferred quarterback would also look like Cam Newton because he's a freak. He's a physical freak of nature. Like a guy that's as big as Cam Newton, running as fast as he does, being as strong as he is, and still able to throw the football fairly accurately. Like that's not a normal person. That's not a normal person. That guy is like just genetically more gifted than all of us, right? Like that guy is leaps and bounds ahead physically. Like I would make the very strong argument that if I coached college football, my ideal quarterback would also be Cam Newton. But without the ideal quarterback, with Jarrett Stidham, who, okay, in fairness, Jarrett Stidham is the ideal quarterback as a pocket passer goes, but just not the typical Gus Malzahn, I want my quarterback to be a dual threat guy. No, not really. Jarrett Stidham's quick. I'll give him that. Like Jarrett Stidham is actually fast, and I don't think he gets enough credit for being very fast, but that's not his inclination ever. His inclination is not when the play starts to break down to run. He's still got his eyes downfield. He's still trying to find people open down the field and see if he can make plays with his arm. That's not the typical Gus Malzahn guy, but the two of them have managed to make it work in a way that is absolutely impressive. And I will say this about Auburn, that if they were to make the college football playoff, you would have to say that they'd be the favorite. I think so. Because they're defensively at Alabama's level. We saw that Saturday. We saw it. They are defensively at Alabama's level. And offensively, they're ahead of everybody in the SEC, right? They can run the ball. They can throw the ball. They've got a number of off-kilter plays. They've got read option incorporated in there. They spread you out. Like they do a number of different things that make it very difficult to coach against this particular football team. They do it a lot, and they're very, very, very good at it. Clutch with Keon Rose on 92.7 FM. Nooga Radio, NoogaRadio.com. Here in Chattanooga, Tennessee. I'm not overly sold at this point. And I know Georgia was my pick, by the way, to win the East, which I feel very good about myself on that one. I did pick Alabama to win the West, but who didn't pick Alabama? You'd be crazy if you didn't pick Alabama. If you didn't pick Alabama, you were just being a contrarian for no good reason. But I did pick Georgia. I feel very good about that Georgia pick. But I don't believe in Georgia as much as I did earlier this season, because I've seen this team be exposed in their one-dimensionality, and the fact that they're playing the school that exposed them again. Maybe they've been able to tweak some things, but this is fundamentally who they are. They have a freshman quarterback, right? And I said Jacob Eason. I meant Jake Fromm earlier. I meant Fromm. But, even if you were to throw Jacob Eason in there, Jacob Eason hasn't really played all year, hasn't found the rapport and the rhythm with a lot of his teammates that Fromm has got at this point. You do have to keep going with Fromm. But it's just a really hard task to ask Jake Fromm to step up and throw passes into the teeth of this defense. Now, we'll give this to Georgia. Like, this is the thing that the bone I will toss to Georgia as we head into the SEC title game. The bone that I will toss to Georgia is this, that when they were playing Auburn, that game really fell apart in the second half of the game. Georgia is fully capable, because Georgia's defense, by the way, is smothering in its own right. Georgia is fully capable of hanging with Auburn and being right there with them pace for pace every step of the way. They just didn't do it in the last game. And I'm also a big fan of these rematches, of in-season rematches. I'm a huge fan of those. Very huge fan of those. Clutch with Keon Rose here on Nooga Radio, NoogaRadio.com on 92.7 FM. So we're coming up to the end here, and I want to talk about the NFL a little bit, because the NFC South and the AFC South are both becoming very intriguing, right? The Tennessee Titans were able to win against the Colts. They escaped a game that they really should have been just pounding the Colts into powder, but the Colts surprise people all the time. And I also mentioned with rivalry games that they're just so familiar with one another that you just can't sneak things past people. You can't take stuff for granted. Marcus Mariota leads the game-winning drive in order to get the Titans the win over the Colts, and the Jaguars fall apart at the end of their game against the Cardinals, right? Get beaten by Blaine Gabbert, their former quarterback, who is booty for most of the time. Not that game, though. Blaine Gabbert was on it, was absolutely on it, took him to task. And now the Titans are tied at the top of the AFC South. If they were able to pull away from the Jaguars here, and they are able to pull away from the Jaguars, in my opinion, because their quarterback, the Jaguars quarterback, that is Blake Bortles. And Blake Bortles is Blake Bortles. The Jaguars need a serious upgrade at that position, which is funny because they're winning so much that I don't think that they can get it. Like in terms of we're just going to draft a guy at quarterback and see if we can finally solve the piece to this puzzle, where we've just got this great defense. We've got this punishing running game. We've got one of the best offensive lines in football, but we have no signal caller. That problem's got to get solved. And I think that the Jaguars are actually doing themselves a disservice in a way, because they are not bad enough to draft a very good quarterback in this draft that was supposed to be, at least initially, very loaded with quarterbacks. Right? That kid Josh Allen in Wyoming that was supposed to be the next Carson Wentz, and Sam Darnold and Josh Rosen, even though Sam Darnold might actually not be coming out into the draft. All of these guys were supposed to be available, and I don't think that Jacksonville's going to be able to get any of those guys. And I also don't think that they're going to ultimately win this division. I think the Titans are going to win it. The Titans are just a better football team, like a more well-rounded football team. They don't have the defense that Jacksonville has, but you know what they do have? They have the quarterback in a quarterback league. And I think that matters more. And then Atlanta, the Falcons are able to win their game, right? Come out there, they balled out. Julio Jones, 253 yards, 2 touchdowns. Matt Ryan looking a little bit like his MVP self. I was not ready for the level that Matt Ryan came out with. Matt Ryan came out slinging the rock. And I was very impressed. I got to tell you, I was absolutely very impressed by the way that he's been playing. And they've won 3 in a row now, and they're tied for second in the NFC South. If the playoffs were to start today, you'd have 3 teams in the NFC South in the playoffs. Yes, you would. You'd have the Saints, you'd have the Panthers, you'd have the Falcons. They'd all be in. So the Falcons are just trying to hang around in this thing and make sure that they stay in it, because you've got a bunch of annoying little other teams in all these other divisions in football nipping at your heels. And I don't think that you really want that. I don't. But all these teams are there. They're all right there. And I don't know if you're all of these other schools exactly what it is that you want. Watch with Keon Rose here on Nooga Radio, NoogaRadio.com. And they got a big day out of Tevin Coleman as well. Like, when Atlanta is able to be a well-rounded football team, they look like their Super Bowl selves. They just haven't been well-rounded for much of the season. I think that Steve Sarkisian on the level 2 is starting to find his footing as the offensive coordinator of this team. And it's been getting better as the season has gone on. And I also think that as this team starts to get further and further away from that Super Bowl that was just absolutely horrific. Because Terry Bradshaw was on Colin Cowherd's show a few days back, and Terry Bradshaw was saying, like, yeah, that stuff sticks in your mind. You lose the Super Bowl, you will think about that Super Bowl for the rest of your life. And certainly you don't think it's distracting when you play. Like, you just don't see like aftershocks of what it is that could have been while you're playing. Like, that's incredibly distracting. That's incredibly distracting. So I think that if you are the Atlanta Falcons, you've moved in a very positive direction. I'm getting the sinking feeling that my bumper music is not going to play, because my bumper music did not come on to play me in, and my bumper music did not show up in any of the ad spots, nor did any of the ads run. So I'm going to say that I'm going to have to tell you all goodbye. Coming up to the end of the show, remember, folks, it's not how you start, it's how you finish. Stay clutch, and I will see you all in 24 hours.
WBLZ HD4 Ottawa, W224AZ Chattanooga,
92.7 Digital FM 95.3 HD4
Chattanooga.
CBS News. I'm Matt Piper. The U.S. is calling North Korea's latest missile